We've discussed the European explorers who reconnected the Eastern and Western hemispheres in the 15 and 1600s: Columbus, Magellan, Balboa, and many others. And we've talked about the riches and power they brought to their sponsors, the kings and queens who invested in them and who financed their journeys. What I'd like to do now is talk about the challenges of empire. It's easy to say that Spain got rich off its holdings in the New World, but what did that mean? What did they have to do? For example, how do you manage a global empire, especially in the 15, 16, or 1700s? Today, it takes 19 hours to fly from Dallas to Manila with one stop. You can call or send an email immediately, but to move people or goods, it takes some planning. How would you do it hundreds of years ago? I'd like to talk about the challenges that faced rulers in those years of managing a global economic empire. Secondly, I'd like to talk about a specific technique that the Spanish king used in order to manage his empire. And third, I'd like to leave you asking about current challenges of managing a global economic empire. Might be easier today, but it's not without its challenges. Let's start with the Iberian Empire. Iberian refers to both Spain and Portugal, the two occupants of the Iberian Peninsula. You can see on the map the territory these two controlled in 1600. It truly was a global empire, reaching from Europe to Africa to India, onto the coast of China in the Philippines, and of course over in the New World, where their holdings were vast. I'd like to focus on one technique the Spanish used to manage their empire: the Manila Galleon, a ship that sailed between Acapulco and Manila, connecting two parts of the Spanish Empire for 250 years, between 1565 and 1815. The ships were built in Manila, so let's say the voyage began there. The journey was perilous, with ships leaving in June or July, often sailing north of the 40th parallel, where the wind and currents were most favorable, then sailing down the west coast of North America to Acapulco. It typically took 6 months, but could take as little as 4 or as many as 8 months. Crowded together in the heat with a poor diet, many travelers died of disease. After docking at Acapulco, the ship's cargo was emptied, it was cleaned, it was reloaded, and the trip back was easier, taking only 3 to 4 months. The entire voyage took approximately a year to connect two far-flung parts of empire. Today, that would be 8,900 miles to fly. Think of how much longer it would be by sea. The Manila Galleon, called the Nau-de-Chine or Spanish ship, or Chinese ship, by the Spaniards, left laden with silk, Chinese porcelain, Persian carpets, spices, slaves, and gold, and returned to Manila with silver to buy more goods, typically 3 million silver pesos. Profits were enormous. Silk sold for 10 times the Asian price in Mexico. The crown took a cut of the profits, as did every middleman along the way. And with the king so far away, so difficult to supervise what was happening at the ports, who was to know if a tax collector or a customs officer took a bribe to turn a blind eye or took a little something home for himself? The risks were also enormous. One sailor described the journey as the longest and most dreadful of any in the world, enough to destroy a man of steel, much less of flesh and bone. In addition to dying on the ship of disease, some ships were lost at sea or had to turn back due to bad weather. Some were attacked. Once other nations and sailors became aware of the floating treasure chests, they tried to steal the bounty. The galleons came to be armed, however, and only 4 were completely lost to piracy. 4 in 250 years is not bad, but was often enough to inspire others to attempt piracy. Why did the galleon come to an end? Well, the Spanish monopoly over the port of Manila ended, and the centers of global trade changed. The United States, China, Brazil, and India became more dominant. British naval power grew. The major locations and actors changed, but the challenges of managing a global empire remained. Distance, theft. Can you think of others? Can you think of some that were eliminated over time? Perhaps new ones that came up?